You're very welcome along to the Matchbook Trail. We have 3 weeks to go to the Cheltenham Festival. It is getting to that time of year. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey. Delighted to welcome Matt Toombs and Donn McClean. We've been at this since November, but we're getting there. And every single week we cover the weekend in review, eyecatcher section. But now leading up to the festival, we're going to do 2 races this week focused on the Brown Advisory and the Champion Chase. So looking forward to getting into the teeth of it with Matt Toombs and Donn McClean. As I said, before we get going, a quick reminder into a brand new Cheltenham offer. It is our most generous offer out there, and it's available right up to the Cheltenham Festival. So if you haven't got a Matchbook account and you'd like to set up one ahead of the festival, just enter the bonus code POD50, POD100, and you can see the full T's and C's there. You bet £50, essentially get £100 worth in free bets. It's all the T's and C's are available on screen there now. Just enter the bonus code POD100. Yeah, guys, we're going to run through the weekend review and we'll get into Cheltenham talk later in the show. So you can skip ahead. We will clip out the separate races on YouTube as well if you just want to focus on the Ante-Post preview. But we'll start with the Ascot Chase. Matt, hit us with your trend and your thoughts on the race, because it was a great race on its own for Jonbon to win, but it felt like his Cheltenham credentials almost took a hit off the back of it, just based on the commentary. What was your assessment of the race?
Yeah, I agree. A fantastic advert for the game. And the training skills of Nicky Henderson and Paul Nicholls, 2 veterans fighting out the finish of this Grade 1. Be interesting to see about Cheltenham. I personally, and we'll get on to it in a minute, will bypass Cheltenham. But trends-wise, first 9 Ryanair runners, 4 from 19, 49% profit. But in the last 12 renewals, they're 0 from 15. And only Frodon and Protectorat have won for Britain in the last 10 renewals after British Yards have won the first 11. So it's a classic race where the power shift westwards across the Irish Sea in recent years has impacted how good a trial it is. And only 3 of the last 10 winners have even gone to the festival, rather than go to the Melling Chase instead. Now, Jonbon had a pretty hard race in the Clarence House 4 weeks earlier. I was keeping an eye on the markets, but he was really strong in the betting. And he looked in trouble coming into the straight. But what really caught the eye was how he looked to win this through stamina, not speed. It was truly run, 101% finishing speed. If you've never seen him before, you'd be saying he might improve for going up in trip beyond the 2 mile 5 here. So that question you raised, what do you do with him now? He showed last year he could back up 1 hard race quickly in the Champion Chase by then winning the Melling. But when asked to back up a second time, 3 weeks later, he was flat in the Celebration. So having had 2 hard races, maybe it'd be going to the well once too often with just a 26-day break to the Ryanair. A lot would depend on what happens with Factor File, of course. I'd imagine that the Melling Chase would be the best target. He's never been at his best at Cheltenham. I'd give the Bowl some consideration too, if there's a sound surface. It's another 4 furlongs, but it's a fast track and he might well get it. He might even improve for it. It was an 11th Grade 1 win over fences, 12th in all. Been a fantastic servant to connections. And so Pitt Dorey. This was his 9th season in training. He'd won in 7 of the previous 8. Jumping got a bit scrappy mid-race, but he still ran really well. I thought he was going to win early on in the straight. And although he's 11, he's looked as good as ever this season. Paul Nicholls rightly talking about keeping him in training next season. Why would you retire him when he's still at his peak? He hasn't run at Cheltenham since the Triumph 7 years ago. So he'll go on to Aintree again, where he'd have the Melling or the Bowl as feasible options. So I doubt the Ascot Chase is going to have too much of an impact on Cheltenham this year, but it was a cracking race to watch.
Okay, yeah, Donn, would you concur with a lot of that? I mean, the race itself, as we said, was a great race, but looking at the Cheltenham Festival, which the show does, maybe Jonbon perhaps might not even go to the festival, according to me.
I wouldn't disagree with that at all. Look, what a race, and brilliant to watch it, because it kind of ebbed and flowed going to the third last. It looked like Jonbon was travelling all over Pitt Dorey, and then running around the home turn when Harry Cobden just kind of gave Pitt Dorey a little bit of a squeeze. Nicola de Boinville had to get more serious in Jonbon, and for a few strides it looked like he might not get him. Neither was good at the third last, neither was good at the last either, but by then Jonbon just seemed to be getting the upper hand, and he just needed to jump the last fence no worse than Pitt Dorey did, and he did that. And like, what a horse Jonbon is. He's had now 27 runs, he's won 20 times, finished second 7 times. That's some record, never been out of the first 2, given the level of competition at which he's competed. But no, like, it's he's just, I fully agree with what Matt said there about skipping Cheltenham. He's had those 2 hard races. He's never at his best at Cheltenham. 5 of his 7 defeats have been at Cheltenham, and going back over Racing Post ratings, his best run at Cheltenham is the joint 8th best of his career. according to Racing Post ratings. So, you know, we and it's kind of been said that like for a while his seconds were at Cheltenham, but I think it's kind of, the proof is probably there. It's, you know, I think it's safe enough to conclude that he's not at his best at Cheltenham. He's not as good there as he is definitely at Ascot or Aintree, Sandown as well, even though he's been beaten twice at Sandown as well now. He's finished second twice at Sandown. But yeah, bring him to Aintree, go back to the Mellon Chase. And yeah, he's had 4 runs this season, but the last 2 runs were hard runs. So I think I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him going to the Mellon Chase, or even, as Matt was saying, stepping up in trip, because this is 2 miles 5 and run at a strong pace, finished a speed of 101% according to Race IQ. So, and he saw it out well. He won it through grit and stamina. He outstayed Pictori. So yeah, like either he'd be very interesting, stepped up even to 3 miles or 3 miles and a furlong for the bull. Pictori likewise, an 11-year-old now. And he won a Mellon Chase as well. He beat Fakir Dideris in the Mellon Chase in 2023. He's run 3 times at Aintree, pulled up in the other 2 races, including behind Jonbon in the Mellon Chase in 2024. He's only had that 1 run at Sandown, as Matt alluded to. He was 10th in the Triumph Hurdle or at Cheltenham. So again, wouldn't be surprising to see him skip that again. He would be interesting in a bowl. Like he stays well. He's only had 1 run over 3 miles. That was in the Charlie Hall Chase early this season when he finished second behind Jello. So I'm sure this was his Gold Cup. I'm sure Paul Nicholls had him trained to the minute for this, given his record in the race. He's now won it twice and finished second in the race twice. But if he were, I'm sure Aintree is the plan with him now. But I wouldn't mind seeing him stepping up in trip. Like, he's an 11-year-old now, but he's only, you know, if an 11-year-old can be unexposed at a trip, he's still probably unexposed over 3 miles. So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing him stepping up and trip and taking it in the bowl. But yeah, brilliant horse race. Apparently there were plenty of people at Ascot on Saturday, and they got a treat from this race.
Yeah, and Jonbon's just, what a horse, in fairness. Like, for all the hype he's lived up to, hasn't he, in fairness to him. Donn, we'll stick with you for the Red Mills Chase, and another horse that's, you know, a big name horse, I would say, Ante-Post. I mean, firstly, this was a very cool ride from Paul Townend, I thought. He knew he was on the best horse, as he said after the race, and well, thank God he did, I guess.
It really was a cool ride. Like, obviously Paul felt the energy that he had under him, and he didn't go for Ante-Post until quite late in the piece. It's his first run since he was brought down in the Dooley Insurance Novices Chase over 3 miles at Punchestown back in April or May. Lecky Watson, actually stable companion, was who brought him down at the first fence in the home straight. But great to see him back. It was only a 4-horse race. They went no gallop at all, finished a speed of 123%. So it tells you, A, the sedateness of the gallop, and B, the speed that Ante-Post had to show in order to pick up and get the better of Safarer, because when Safarer went on, he looked set for home. And it's a funny angle at Gowran Park. I wasn't there, but watching the TV pictures on Racing TV, you could see Safarer go down to the last, and he jumped it. You were kind of expecting Ante-Post to be nearly upsized, but he wasn't. He was about 1.5 lengths behind him. And it was only then really that Paul Townend gave him a squeeze, and he wasn't on the best part of the track either. He had to go towards the far side in order to make his ground. But no, it was a really impressive performance by Ante-Post. He won the Manifesto Chase last year. He beat Gidley Park in that, and Django Bay. That was a big performance. He's only run once at Cheltenham. He won the Bearing Bingham in 2023. He beat Gaelic Warrior in that. But he skipped Cheltenham in 2024. He went and won the Aintree Hurdle. Remember that race in which he got the better of Bob Ollinger and Langer Dan, that 3-way go to the line. And yeah, like he's got a hurdles mark of 163, which is I think higher than his new chase mark. Even his 157 going into the race, I think he's 160 now over fences. But it tells you he's just top class over hurdles and fences. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see where he goes. He's only had 6 runs over fences, so he's still a relatively lightly raced horse, and he was sent off a long odds on shot here. But no, it was a really nice performance. Yeah, super ride by Paul Townend, who went 4 for 4 on the day at Gowran Park. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if Ante-Post does go to Cheltenham. He's got, obviously, the Ryanair Chase would be the race for him, or if he skips it again and goes on to Aintree. Safarer, who finished second, he's a better chaser than hurdler. His chase mark is, I think, 17 pounds higher than his hurdles mark, and it looked like he was going to go on and get another win on the board. His last win was in the Foxrock Handicap Chase at Navan in December last season. So, but he ran his race as well, and Classic Getaway finished third. He led from early. He had the run of the race. He's 10 years old now. He won this race last year, beat San Sam and Journey with Me in the race last year, and he goes well at Gowran Park. and he just didn't have the class or the pace to cope with Empire Pass. But yeah, and Buddy One, interesting, Paul Gilligan saying that he could go on to the Coral Cup at Cheltenham and maybe onto the Grand National after that. He's got an entry in the Grand National. I think he's still a better hurdler than Chaser. His rating tells you that he's a better hurdler than Chaser. And like the Coral Cup, that would be an interesting project for him. He finished third behind Iroko in the Martin Pipe Hurdle in 2023. He finished fourth in the Sayers Hurdle, fifth in the Sayers Hurdle last year, and maybe dropping back into handicap company, cheap pieces on here for the first time. That would be interesting for him. So maybe keep a little eye on Buddy One, but of all of them, obviously Empire Pass is the most exciting one. Time to see where he goes next.
Yeah, Matt will have the stats on the Coral Cup Grand National double. I'm sure there's a few horses there. Yeah, your thoughts on this, Matt, and a trend as well, which obviously because the Red Mills chase is just so close to Cheltenham, invariably, even if horses do attempt to run the Cheltenham Festival, it doesn't always go great.
Yeah, that's right. Runners 1 from 36 this century for exactly the reason you say, Daniel. The Grand National now, there is a bit of a theory that you want a moderate jumper of park fences because they can, if they hit the top of those, they have that trajectory. They go through the Grand National fences. If you think about Iron Maximus and Tiger Roll and Vanilla and those sorts of horses. So perhaps Buddy One is the right sort for it. It's an interesting idea. Impere Pass, echo what Don said, and for me, he's always been a speed horse. The Mullins camp have been trying to turn him into a stayer. But you look at his form, he's thrashed Gaelic Warrior in a typically steadily run bearing Bingham, beaten only 3 lengths over State Man, the December hurdle at Leopardstown 2 seasons ago, and he's never been given the chance to run over 2 miles over fences. I suspect intermediate trips probably suit him best now. He's got a bit lazy, takes a while to get going, but he's got a real turn of foot when he does. So, as Don explained, Paul Tanner, very cool on him. Didn't seem worried at all, and he came up the worst part of the track. Didn't have a hard race here. Maybe that was what Paul was aiming at, because normally you'd be a bit worried, seasonal debut and then only 26 days to the Ryanair. But this year, with 4 weeks between Cheltenham, he could do Ryanair and then on to the Melling Chase, I would have thought. And it does put the Ryanair plans for the Clesutton team up in the air a bit. I'd been working on the basis that one of Factorfile and Gaelic Warrior would run, and Willie would wait to see what JP wanted to do, and then Gaelic Warrior would run in the other race. But Impere Pass very much in the mix now. This was his first run outside novice company. So he isn't a proven top-notch over fences like they are, but he's got the inherent class to be. So it'd be fascinating to see what the vibes are for him in the run-up to the festival. And apparently he couldn't go the gallop with Kopek de Board in the private schooling race at Punchestown. So for what it's worth, that's a small positive for Kopek de Board fans. Though I understand Impere Pass didn't have the cheap pieces on in that schooling race. And Safia Don touched on, he's really interesting for what's going to happen now. You know, as Don was explaining, his form over fences much better. Last year, he was given 145 in the Coral Cup, the biggest rise of any Irish horse, £11. But he's run 5 times over hurdles since then without winning. So it'd be interesting when the festival entries come out later today for the handicaps, what he's in, and then next week what the British handicapper does with his hurdles mark, because he could be a lurker there if this has been a long-term plan.
Okay, we'll stick with you, Matt, for Kingwell Hurdle, and Alexi, who we spoke about after he won the Greatwood. Champion Hurdle goes there with a place chance?
Definitely, I think so. It's wide open, isn't it? Yeah. So you've got to run him. The Tizzards are fantastic. If they've got a realistic outsider, they want to give it a go, and that's good for racing. And in this case, why wouldn't you? And this has been a good trial for a race that's so late in the season. Runners 4 from 38 in the Champion Hurdle this century, 87% profit. All 4 went off double-figure prices, including Golden Ace at 26.0. So it's sometimes a race where if a horse has had a bit of an interrupted preparation or is just coming through the ranks, then they throw their hat in the ring there. With a Champion Hurdle like this, then that may be more important than usual. Heavy ground here, that was a question mark for the 3 main protagonists. Doesn't get too deep at Wincanton. They look to be getting through it. And I wondered if Alexi's rapid progress had come to an end when he was 4 lengths third off 147 in the Big Ascot handicap just before Christmas. But watching that race again, I've forgotten how keen he was. And with Wilfred and Hot Fuss again finding out the finish of a valuable handicap at Windsor next time, that form looks better than it did at the time too. He was getting £2 here from Rubo, who was acting up at the start. So the bare form's nowhere near champion hurdle standard, but he won, and on ground that probably wouldn't have suited. Jumped a bit high early on. He jumped better in the Great Wood, maybe going a better gallop on better ground had helped that. Still green at the business end here, looking around coming to the last, then again on the run in. He's had 8 runs on the flat. This was his 9th over hurdles, so he should know better by now. Perhaps he's just a bit quirky. The flip side of that is, if they can get him to concentrate a bit more, he could improve again. I'd be tempted to try some headgear with him. You would be worried he'd get lit up, but I think I'd give it a go in the champion hurdle. So, and the more I look at that, the more murky the picture seems. So 21.0, definitely a place chance, Daniel, but he also could win. Wouldn't be the biggest surprise ever. The stunning Secret Squirrel was back. It was good to see him. He was getting £4 from the winner. He'd not run heavy either, but he'd beaten Cabrera Matan on soft in a handicap at Windsor just over a year ago. He looked to go through it okay. Rated 133 coming into this, and was left on that. It's hard to evaluate the form in defeat in these small field conditions races. But he was progressive last season. Hopefully that sets him up for a spring campaign. He ran well in defeat at Newbury and Ascot, but he does handle sharp tracks. He won at Kempton, Taunton and Windsor. So maybe Aintree for him will be better than Cheltenham, trying to avoid the bounce. There's a conditionals and amateurs 2-mile handicap there. He looks professional enough for that. So he looks one to keep an eye on in the spring.
Yeah, Don, for you, I guess that champion hurdle picture, I mean, we only have to go back to this time last year. I mean, people are like, why would you run? And now, obviously, Golden Ace won. So it just shows you there is a chance of an upset in this type of race.
Yeah, Golden Ace scraped home from Burdett Road in this race last year. Burdett Road, of course, running at Riyadh on Saturday behind Sons of Lovers. Another big win for Joseph O'Brien and Dylan Brown. Want to get over there. But yeah, look, it was a really interesting race because Alexei, he travelled really well through his race, and when he moved up at the second last, it looked like he was going to go on and win it. And then he seemed to, I don't know if the crowd's close to the horses at Wincanton are inordinately close, because he seemed to be having a look at them, and then Rubo came back at him. Wasn't great at the last, but then when Brendan Powell got down and drove him forward, he went on again, and he was still looking around. I mean, I thought he won with plenty in hand, and fully agree with Matt. He fully deserves his chance in a champion hurdle, and a really open champion hurdle. He'll be better and better ground as well. When he won the Great Wood Hurdle, he won it off a mark of 134, which obviously you have to be a lot higher than 134 to win it. When to win a champion hurdle, when Rooster Booster won the Great Wood Hurdle the year that he won the champion hurdle, he was rated 155. But he was an 8-year-old then, and that was his 14th run over hurdles, Rooster Boosters. When Sizing Europe won the Great Wood Hurdle, excuse me, he won it off a mark of 137. And he was only a 5-year-old, as Alexei was when he won it. So there is precedent there of sorts, as in to make that. I know Sizing Europe didn't win the champion hurdle, but he looked like he was going to, and he got injured at the second last. So there's a path there, and he's a horse on an upward curve. As Matt was saying, he was keen in that Ascot race, and that Ascot race is working out well. I know it's a handicap, but he finished third. He lost out in the runner-up spot just in the end behind Willful. But I think he had to do something like this on Saturday in order to get back into the champion hurdle picture properly, and he's done it now. I think there's more to come. Yeah, interesting. Matt suggesting cheek pieces. That could be an interesting project. That could just elicit a little bit of improvement from him that he might need in order to go and win a champion hurdle. And he beat Rubo. Like, Rubo's a good stick. He's a 149 rated horse. He was getting £2 from him, all right. But Rubo goes well at Wincanton. He's won there 3 times from 5 runs, and he's a horse probably better and better ground as well. But Alexei beat him pretty well. I think by a good bit more than the winning margin. Secret Squirrel, yeah, first run since he fell at the final flight in the William Hill Hurdle at Newbury back in February last year. He's never run at Cheltenham. He's actually entered in the Constitution Hill race at Sutherland Friday, so it'll be interesting to see if he takes his chance in that. And into Lotto, first run since leaving Joseph O'Brien for Daisy Hitchens. Ran well to a point, only weakened from the second last flight. I know they didn't go a great pace, but that was his first run since he finished down the field in the Irish Zarovich. He finished 4th behind Sir Genu in the anniversary hurdle at Aintree, the 4-year-old's hurdle, back in 2024. He's a nicely bred horse as well. As won a Group 2 race at Prix de Royale. So that was I thought he ran well enough at a massive price in a race in which he was punching way above his weight. So maybe just keep a little eye on him after his first run for a new trainer.
Okay, let's move on to the Red Mills Trial Hurdle and stick with you, Don, because we're going to cover a horse that went off favourite to beat Majbur and Cargizi in a Triumph Hurdle only a couple of years ago, Storm Heart. And since then, it's just been a slow, steady moving, into novice company still. But a great win to get his first novice win. And where is the seeding for this horse?
Yeah, we don't know. I think the first 4 horses here are all interesting for different reasons. As you mentioned, Dan, Stormheart won well. They didn't go a great pace. Work Ahead, the runner-up, he got it easy in front, but it was a nice step forward from him as well from his first run back after a break. It's only his second run since he finished. I think he was last in the Spring Novices Hurdle last year, and he returned there a couple of weeks ago, and this was a good step forward from him. So he led. He looked a likely winner, actually jumping the last. Darragh O'Keefe just asked him to pick up off the sedate pace that he was able to set. In the end, Stormheart just ran him down. But Stormheart, yeah, really interesting horse. He won at Limerick over Christmas on his first run back after a break. That was over 2.5 miles in heavy ground, in which he kept on well. Like, he was only just beaten by McLaury in the big 2 mile handicap hurdle at the Dublin Racing Festival back in 2024. That was a race in which Irish Panther, an Arkle contender, was third, and in which he finished off quickly. So the fact that he was able to see out 2.5 miles well, and his previous run at Limerick on heavy ground suggests that coming back to 2 miles off a sedate pace in a Red Mills trial hurdle wouldn't be ideal for him. So I thought he did well to win. As you said, Dan, he split Cargese and Majborough in the Spring Juvenile Hurdle as a juvenile back in 2024 and was sent off as favourite for the Triumph Hurdle on the back of that run. He was the choice of Paul Townend in that race as well. That's the race in which Majborough and Cargese fought out the finish. Of course, he couldn't have ridden Majborough, but he could have ridden Cargese. So it was interesting that he chose to ride Stormheart instead. That was his only run at Cheltenham so far, Stormheart. But he's got a mark of 147. I think that, like, if Willie Mullins and Digginstown wanted to go down the handicap route, that's probably a mark that could underrate him. And I think back up to 2.5 miles, we'll see him in a better light as well. And the 4th horse, Cowabunga, this was a really good run. He's one of my eyecatchers, which we'll come on to later on. I just thought he did really well. He was again off a sedate pace. It was his first run back after a break. It's only his 4th run over hurdles. He won his maiden hurdle at Ferryhouse back in January last year. As in last season, he beat William Money and Cocktail de Vin and Zanush in that race, and that race has been working out obviously spectacularly well. William Money finished second in the Supreme. Cocktail de Vin was really impressive winning his beginner's chase at Leopardstown over Christmas. And Zanush, she's now had 3. She's won her last 3. Colin Murphy's mare, she's got a rating of 130. So that was a big run. And even in the race on Saturday, Cowabunga was kind of going for a run up the inside, and Work Ahead then moved back after the second last fight. Work Ahead moved back to the inside, and Mark Walsh had to check him and take him around. He finished off his race well. I thought this was a lovely run back. I don't think he's got a rating yet if they were thinking of handicaps, but I think he's better than a handicapper anyway. And yeah, wherever he goes next, I'll be interested to see where he is.
Yeah, Matt, there any of those 4 horses interest you going forward that finished in the top 4?
Oh yeah. This was a really interesting race. I echo what Donn said about Storm. I'm a fan of his. That mark of 147 Donn mentioned in Ireland, just to put that in context, because Willie said he'll be entered in the county and what was the Coral Cup. That Coral Cup race, Whispers won that of 153, Commander of Fleet 152, William Henry 151 in the last dozen renewals. So you can win it from those sorts of marks. A very classy race. And I definitely with Donn, I think he could well be a fair bit better than that. So it'll be interesting to see what the BHA handicapper makes of him. Work Ahead was reported to be still burly in the ring. He got the run of things a bit out front. Henry's talking about the county hurdle for that because he's had his 5th run here to qualify him. But he went out like a light in the Supreme. So you'd have a little bit of a question mark about the track. But he's up £2 to 145 in Ireland. And again, it'd be fascinating to see what the British handicapper makes of that. Problem, obviously, is the run style. Can't remember any horse making all in the county, even prominently ridden. Horses don't have a good record. So he's one to keep an eye on. Cowabunga, yeah, definitely I'd echo everything Donn said. This was his 4th hurdle start, so he's not eligible for the Cheltenham handicaps, but he might well be going into graded races of a sort of higher quality later in the spring. And finally, your man, now you couldn't call him an eye catcher really because he didn't do anything in the race that was eye catching. But what was really eye catching was that he was running in the race at all. Given in the Haydock Grand National trial over 3.5 miles on this card for the last 2 years, winning it 2 seasons ago. Now he's qualified for the Pertemps final, having finished second at the Leopardstown qualifier off just 118 at Christmas. Perhaps the idea was to get some practice jumping hurdles here. What by Pertemps standards would be a decent gallop. It's about £20 lower over hurdles in Ireland, 1, 2, 3. So I wonder what the British handicapper will make of him if he's entered into the Pertemps today. He's a bit of a monkey. and he probably wants some fair bit of cut in the ground. But if he was given a really low rating based on pure hurdles form, he'd be dangerous in that.
Okay, and we'll stick with you, Matt, for the prestige and the win for the Skeletons. Dalston lad justifies favouritism to win this.
Yeah, an interesting race. A typically interesting race in terms of it being open beforehand. You generally don't get hot favourites for these sorts of races, and it's not the sort of form to be dogmatic about. As a trial, at the first 8 Albert Bartletts, 13 runners, 2 winners and 4 places, so really good trial. Last 13 renewals, none of the 14 runners has done better than 5th. And of course, the Irish have dominated the Albert Bartlett in recent years. Winner Dalston lad got a good positive ride, jumped well until the last. He had problems with ulcers in the autumn. He's been really progressive since cheek pieces were applied, wrapping up a hat trick here. He hadn't shone in 2 starts at Cheltenham, but that was at 67.0 in the bumper. And in the autumn, we're not firing. So I thought they'd want to give the Albert Bartlett a go, given how typically wide open it is. But it was interesting. Dan Skelton was pretty clear they'd go to Aintree for the Sefton. That might be a pointer to the chances of Money Garrow, who's their intended runner in the Albert Bartlett. It's around 34.0. And Uber Tuba, who's one of Donn's eye catchers. So I'll let him talk about him because he was very interesting. As I understand it, the plans for Sean Bowen to ride They Call Me Hugo in the Albert Bartlett. But if that were to change, he's definitely an interesting horse here.
Yeah, Donn, anything to add on that?
Yeah, like it was a good race. They went a good pace, 104% finishing speed, and Dalston lad was prominent up in behind it from early. Like he's a horse in really good form. He's won his last 3 now, all in cheek pieces actually, in the last 2 at Haydock. He's a half brother to Martin, so nicely bred horse as well. And apparently he had ulcers as well earlier in the year. So maybe that's a factor. But he's in a really rich vein of form. He won the handicap hurdle at Haydock on his previous run off a mark of 121. He beat Stay Away Faye in that. And yeah, as Matt was saying, it looks like he's going to skip Cheltenham now and go on to Aintree. So yeah, but an interesting horse. But no, Uber Tuba, I thought he did well to get as close as he did. He was well back in the field early on, and he was actually last turning for home. Now they didn't go a really slow pace, but still it was 104%. It wasn't a breakneck pace either, and it is difficult to make ground from the rear at Haydock. Sometimes it's a tight track. And I thought he did well. He wasn't helped either at the second last when Reckless Spending made a mistake in front of him and he had to check. And it never looked like he was going to get to Dalston lad, but you had to be impressed with the way that he stayed on. He's entering the Turners and in the Albert Bartlett, but I think Ollie Murphy said afterwards that the Albert Bartlett is going to be the race for him, and that makes sense. Like it's the prestige is over an extended 3 miles and a half a furlong. That was only his 3rd run over hurdles. He's a point-to-point winner as well, so I think lots of potential upside to him. And he handled heavy ground at Leicester in his previous run. He handled the better ground here well. So, and you know, the kind of staying test that the Albert Bartlett presents, that could suit him really well. He's a horse who looks like he's going to continue staying. His dam's actually half sister to Gidley Park, and he's from the family of Denman. So lots to like about his breeding as well. And I thought Tashcan ran an interesting race. He was well out the back early on. I know he's an 8-year-old now and he's had plenty of runs, but he's only had 4 runs over hurdles. He finished 5th behind Old Park Star in the Rossington Main, and that was a disappointing run. This was a good step forward from that. And similar to Ubatuba, I thought he did well to close like he did to take 3rd place. Like he won a handicap at Haydock over 1.6 miles on the flat off a mark of 86 back about 4 years ago. He finished 3rd in the Cesarovich behind the Shunter, and he finished 2nd behind Trushan as well in the long distance cup at Ascot. So he's a classy horse. He's got a flat rating of 98 and a hurdles mark of 119. That's obviously a lenient mark if he can reproduce his flat form over hurdles. And with just 4 runs over hurdles, there's every chance that he might be able to do that. He's not entered in the Albert Bartlett, but he could be an interesting handicap project somewhere along the line.
Okay, and we'll stick with you for the novice hurdle over 2 miles at Punchestown, Donna. This could be an impressive winner. Heads up, got the better Lazard, the star of Gordon's, who was highly thought of, obviously.
Yeah, to me, it was great to see Heads Up bouncing back. Like John McConnell, he's regarded him highly, obviously, with Just Cause for a little while, and it was just good to see him bouncing back. He finished 2nd in the champion bumper at Cheltenham last year, and this year he won at Listowel on his hurdling bow. He was good that his jumping was very good. Then he ran in the grade 2 novices hurdle at the November meeting, the Hyde hurdle, I think it is. And he finished 2nd behind No Drama Descend. And No Drama Descend obviously has gone on, won the winter hurdle, won the Challow hurdle as well. He's high in the betting for the Bearing Bingham. And Heads Up finished second behind him. He was well beaten by him in the end, but he went around the inside for most of the race that day. He can probably be marked up on the bare form with that run. I was disappointed with him the last time at Cheltenham, but that was the race at the end of the card. I remember when they had the problems with the ground and it was delayed, and maybe that wasn't ideal for him because he was so keen through the early part of the race. He made a mistake at the first flight. His jumping was poor thereafter, and you just had to put a line through that run and hoping that it was just too bad to be true, therefore hoping that he would bounce back. And he did. Like, it was a good performance, as you said, Dan, to beat Lazare de Sar, who's really highly regarded. It wasn't a great pace. Danny Mullins was able to set a sedate pace, his finishing speed of 115%, and that helped him. But to me, like, he wore a hood for the first time as well, which helped him settle better. He wasn't great at the first flight, but after that, his jumping was good. And to me, when Lazare de Sar came up on the outside, Lazare de Sar flew the final flight, landed with momentum up, got up, probably joined Heads Up, maybe nearly joined him. But the way that Heads Up battled back on the far side, to me, that was impressive. He went on and won by about 3/4 of a length in the end. And yeah, like, he's in the Supreme Novices Hurdle and the Bearing Bingham. I think he's probably a horse who stays well as Dam's sister, New Horizons, 1 over 2 miles, 5 and over 3 miles, and he's another horse from the family of Denman. So you'd think the Bearing Bingham would be the race for him. If he does go to Cheltenham, John McConnell saying afterwards that he wasn't certain to go there. But no, it was good to see him bouncing back. And Lazare de Sar, yeah, I don't think he lost much in defeat. He was beaten by Zeus Power the last day at Navan, who was a non-runner in this race, who just got up and beat him, and he's had to play second fiddle again. But I thought he did well to close on a classy horse off a sedate pace and to get up beside him. In the end, he was I don't know if he was outspeeded or outbattled in the end, but it was a good run. When his fourth run over hurdles, there's more to come from Lazare de Sar for sure. But no, I was happy to see Heads Up back.
Yeah, any thoughts on Heads Up, Matt?
Yeah, I was impressed with him. And the context here is John McConnell was having his first jumps winner in Ireland since October. He did one in Britain in November. He's a bit of a streaky yard, so well worth keeping an eye on in the 3 weeks running up to the festival. He's got a good record overall at Cheltenham, including winning a plate with 7 3 years ago. And yeah, it was interesting in the context of Donn was saying that 115% finishing speed, how much better he did settle here. And that's going to be crucial. So what's going to happen if he does go to Cheltenham? Do you go for the Supreme or the Bearing Bingham? It's tricky. The hullabaloo that goes with the Supreme might mean he runs his race before the tapes go up. Equally, I think the tempo of that race, going to help him settle. So I think that's probably the route I'd go down. I don't know whether Danny Mullen's availability, Willie's going to be mob-handed without bankers in these races, is going to impact it at all. But he's definitely one for the long list, and they're going to be big fields, I think, in these novice hurdles this year. So you're going to have to be keeping an eye on some of these horses who've got good, for example, in his case, festival form, but got good credentials, but are at big prices.
Okay, and we're done our weekend review. Eyecatchers time, and Don, we'll start with you. You obviously covered Cowabunga in the novice hurdle, so maybe lead with that and into your other 2 eyecatchers.
Yeah, Cowabunga for all the reasons earlier on. First run back after a break, only his 4th run over hurdles. I thought he did well, having to check after the second last flight to keep on. Yeah, like he's whether he goes handicapping or goes up in grade, I think he can go up in grade, but depending on what handicap mark he gets, he could be interesting in a handicap before stepping up in grade. But not saying he does have to have another run if he's going to go in a Cheltenham handicap, so that's very unlikely. He's only had 4 runs over hurdles, but no, a horse to keep on the right side, I would say, wherever he goes. Ubatuba as well, we touched on in the Prestige hurdle, finished second behind Dalston Lad. I thought he did well to stay on from the rear and close on a horse who was ridden prominently. He's only had 3 runs over hurdles. He stays well, he handles all types of ground, and say that the Albert Bartlett is probably the race for him. Ollie Murphy indicated that afterwards as well. And the third horse then is Beckett Rock. I thought he ran really well to finish second behind Mount Frisco in the Carey's Cottage Cup, the last race at Gordon Park on Saturday. He was the ground was probably softer than ideal for him, and it was a race in which Sláinte Go Galéir looked like he was going to go and win easily. He went on over the second last and looked to winner. He probably idled on the run in. He's probably a horse to keep in mind as well. Mount Frisco rallied on the far side and got up to beat him. Beckett Rock was rallying as well. He made a mistake at the final fence. He seemed to jump it okay, just kind of nodded a little bit on landing over it. But I thought he did well to finish second on ground that should have been softer than ideal for him. Like he hasn't won yet over fences. And actually, when he won his maiden hurdle at Goran Park, actually, back in November 2023. He had a setback after that, so he missed the rest of the season. So he missed basically his whole novice season. So he had to, the following season, he was competing in open company over hurdles, which wasn't ideal. But last year in the Coral Cup, he ran a really big race. He finished 6th behind Jimmy Desoy, and I had a look at that race again this morning. He was down the inside. He didn't have a lot of, he wasn't unlucky or anything, but he just was in traffic a little bit towards the inside. It got a little bit crowded over there, and he stayed on well up the hill. He wasn't beaten far by Jimmy Desoy. He's got a chase mark now of 130 in Ireland, which is £7 lower than his hurdles mark. And to me, that's really interesting. We know that Henry de Bromhead horses, they can often be a lot better over fences than they are over hurdles. And Beckett Rock now has had 4 runs over fences. It'll be interesting to see if he's entered in handicaps at Cheltenham, A, and B, what mark he gets from the British handicapper, because back on better ground, this 2.5-mile trip suits him well. I think if he is set to go and take his chance in a handicap at Cheltenham, he could be really interesting.
Okay, and Matt, over to you for your eye catchers.
Firstly, Caballero Cliff, who was beaten just over 3 lengths in 4th in the champion bumper at a huge price. He showed plenty of speed there, for all being prominently ridden was an advantage in an unusually steadily run renewal. Particularly encouraging for his future, I thought at the time, because he was the first 4-year-old to finish in the first 4 since Blue Sari in 2019. Shown nothing in 4 other runs, 2 in bumpers before that, 2 since over hurdles, but had a wind up, tongue-tie fitted, and he was absolute revelation at Wincanton. Bit keen in the early part of the race, but cruised into it and bolted up. Now, the runner-up, Mahaba Prince, an uncertain yardstick. This is the 3rd time in a row being beaten odds on. The winner couldn't have done it any better. Robert Stevens Yard's just come into form recently on the flat, and Caballero Cliff's still a 3-figure price for the Supreme. So if you like backing rank outsiders, he'd be one to consider. Second one's Kiss Will, who was a useful novice hurdler last season. After winning a maiden on hurdling debut in January, he was taking the Cheltenham Festival more for experience, I think, with the future in mind. Much too keen to Bearing Bingham. Rounded off the season by winning a strong-looking listed race at Perth. Went up to 3 miles. He ran okay on his 2 starts over fences over intermediate trips. Stepped up to 2 miles 7 in a strong-looking beginners at Punchestown on Sunday. Jumped soundly, fast finishing 1.5 second to a potentially good horse in Soldier in Milan. Rather had the run of the race out front. It was 114% finishing speed. So what are they going to do with Kiss Will now? I thought, right, marathon trips. If he settled, he looked like 3.5 miles. He could be a really good horse. He'd been given 139 in Ireland. So you think, right, he'd be under the 145 ceiling for the National Hunt Chase, or maybe go for the Irish National. We're recording this as the entries for the Festival Handicaps close. Earlier on, he'd only been entered for the Jack Richards. So maybe that suggests he'd run there to get some big field handicap experience before stepping up in trip. But I think he's one to keep an eye on in the spring. And finally, Xar Fatal, who was a good bumper horse for Willie Mullins last season, bolting up by 9 lengths in what's now known as the Docks bumper at Goran over 2 mile 2 in early March. That's produced First Lieutenant Yorkhill and Bob Ollinger to win the Bearing Bingham the following season. Both Willie and Henry de Bromhead like to aim one of their better prospects of it, and he settled well there, but didn't at the Punchestown Festival in the Colts and Geldings Winners of One. He was far too keen. And he'd been switched to Barry Connell. He made a belated hurdling debut here and jumped really slickly for a first-timer. Did go left and bump Danny Donadoni on the run-in, but when the runner-up came and challenged him again, because Arthur Tao pulled clear and Sean Flanagan shrewdly rode him out to the line to make sure there was clear space between the two so the interference didn't change the result. He's entitled to improve a fair bit fitness-wise for this. Be no surprise to see him competitive in graded novice hurdles later in the season. The plan's apparently Fairyhouse and Punchestown, and he's one to keep an eye on.
Okay, Xar Fatal, Kiss Will and Cabello Cliff, Beckett Rock, Ubatuba and Kawabunga for Donn. They're the 6 eye catchers across from Matt and Donn. We're going to head to the Champion Chase, our first one of our Ante-Post previews this week. Just a quick look at the betting before we bring in Matt. Majbra, 3.0 favourite to Marine Nationale, last year's winner, 3.5 or 5-2. 8-1 or 9.0 on Il Ete Tom, 9.8 Lloyd de Sud, and Calixios is 19.5. You've around 30.0 and bigger the rest. So yeah, Matt, that sets us up. I had a quick look at the entries. Are we looking at 12, 13 runners, or where are you? What are you working off that basis before you hit us with your trends and then your thoughts on each price?
I was thinking more high single figures for entries. Trend is that the shortest second season chaser in the SP market, 11 from 25 this century, 105% profit. And I'm glad you read those prices out, Daniel, to give context to this, because this is what I call a prejudice market, by which I mean that punters' prejudices are playing a bigger part than usual in forming the market, and actual form slightly less. Prejudices, biases, they're part of every market. But there seems to be a collective belief that there's a strong chance that either Matchbook blows it or Marine Nationale improves out of all recognition from the Dublin Chase. Now, I've no stats on this, but it must be a rarity to have a market for a championship race where the two main protagonists clashed at levels last time. One beat the other one by 19 lengths fair and square, and they're this close in the Ante-Post markets, 3.0, 3.5. On Dublin Chase form alone, Matchbook would be about 1.4. Now, he left behind two disappointing efforts at DRF. So it's not as if he's got a book of top-class work. I covered some of this in more detail in my article that's on the Matchbook Insights page, but I think he badly needed the run in the hilly way, not just coming on for it, as would normally be the case. He only ran at Christmas, which is very unlike Willie with a 20-day gap, just to get more practice in. So the combination of cheap pieces and faulting tactics, of course, was a big part in the improvement, but I do think it was the first time he'd been really fit. So what can Marine Nationale do? He should improve for better ground. I think a drop back in trip will help. I think Barry Connell looks like he's proving a trainer who really does do well at peaking his horses at Cheltenham. It's another plus. But the ground wasn't that bad on the chase track at DRF, only 11 seconds above standard time, and they went an even gallop. It's not as if it was a swamp, and so you should be putting a line through Marine Nationale's run. He won a Supreme and a Royal Bond on similar ground. So he should get closer at Cheltenham, but can you see him making up 19 lengths if Matchbook runs his race? I can't. So typically there are only 3 or 4 with a realistic chance in an average champion chase. Shocks are rare. 21 of the 25 renewals this century gone to the front 3 in the market. But it is generally such a test of jumping at that eyes out gallop. It's an unpredictable race between those 3, 4, 5 who have a realistic chance. And 10 of the 13 odds on shots this century have been beaten. But Matchbook's not odds on. He's nearly about 3.0. So he's the most talented horse in the race. He's just put in a fantastic performance. Yet that's the sort of price you can back him in. Yet he's got to get into a jumping rhythm in the early part of the race. More jumping at Cheltenham in the first half mile or so. You'd also hope Mark Walsh doesn't do the sort of repeat of the left hand down tactic that he did as they came into the straight in the Arkle, because you've got that trappy second last fence that comes up very quickly. But he's much the most likely winner. There's a case for saying he should be odds on. So I keep it simple and back the best horse. If you want to back at a bit of a bigger price, I'd take on both Ante-Post and L'Eau de Sud. Ante-Post's got a bad record at the festival. It took an exhausted looking fall last time. That's a terrible prep. The last horse to win after falling at any run early in the season was Martha's Son in 1997. And L'Eau de Sud, I think the freshness factor is being overplayed. Last year he was impressive in the November, then backed it up by running to a £1 higher mark on RPRs than Henry VIII at Sandown. Yet this season, when he was thrashed 18 lengths by Ante-Post, the Tingle Creek just apparently should be ignored because it came too soon. I just don't think he's good enough. He likes Cheltenham, he's best fresh, but his only piece of form giving him a chance is the Schlower, and I think Jonbon was never going. So I'd take those two on, and at a bigger price, I'd give a word to my old friend Quilixios. I only have it as 60-40 in Marine Nationale's favour, rewatching the race where they came down to last year. He is a really good horse. He hasn't run since, but he's an excellent record fresh, including beating Marine Nationale by 7.5 lengths, giving him £4 on their seasonal debuts last season. He had a bit of a chasing experience advantage there, but even so, it was a very good performance. The vibes weren't brilliant in Henry's Racing Post stable tour this morning. And you would want to look at the vibes in the 3 weeks we've got left before the festival starts, because Henry's winners off moderate preps are often heavily punted in the last week or so. Both Bob Ollinger and Manila Indo were 21.0 a week before the festival, won the Stairs at 9.0 and the Gold Cup at 10.0 respectively. So keep an eye out for the Quilixios vibes. He might be one for momentum punters if you want for one at a big price. But at the prices, to me, Matchbook looks far too big. I think barring accidents, he'll win easily.
Okay, before I move on to Donn, so when you have a bet where you think genuinely you could be odds on, now I don't know exactly if you'd go as far as that if you were making the book math, for example, but 3.0, you'd obviously just go a little bit under what all the other firms are at, for example. So that's my first question. How can you, when the market's completely disagreeing with you, basically, are you a little bit wary that you might be missing something? And the second thing is, if Matchbook somehow managed to sneak that article and win it, would we be seeing 3.0 in front of us, or do people associate because he didn't manage to get back up and win despite those two mistakes that he could be vulnerable over fences at Cheltenham?
Yeah, two good questions. The first one, yeah, I'm always looking for reasons I've missed something. So, for example, I rewatch a lot of races. You can't watch a race once, particularly if you've had a bet in it, because you'll be watching one specific horse. What I tend to do is, if there's a horse I'm really positive about, I try and re-watch the race looking for things to be negative about, and vice versa. So, yeah, that's definitely it. And the record of odds-on shots, 10 of the 13 this century have been beaten in a champion chase. You've got to factor that in. But I think the article was, I don't think it was an ideal piece of race riding him right down the inside there, because he's a bit slow to react to things. And he came up against that second last fence and just made a complete mess of it. And as you say, he won easily otherwise. But he has made mistakes and looked a bit tricky on other occasions. It's not just a one-off. And that's what a lot of people are saying. The reason he's such a big price is people, the cheap pieces, yeah, they've worked once, will they work again? He's put in one brilliant performance, but some average ones, so you can't rely on him. And that has to be part of his price. So I personally, I wouldn't have him odds on with all that. I would have him slightly odds against. But maybe if I was pricing it up, and I've not done a book, but it'd be something about 2.2. So I certainly think at 3.0, he's good value.
Yeah, Don, I don't know what you're going to go for here, but good luck to you if you're taking on Matchbook after that case. But
yeah, I haven't had a bet in the race yet, and I'm finding it hard to get an angle into the race. My I suppose default position is to look for something to take on the top two, because obviously they're taking out a massive percentage of the market between them. But I can't find it. But look, yeah, like I'm a fan of both horses. Matchbook was brilliant the last day. I thought that his jumping to his left would bring him onto the worst of the ground. Two things happened to negate that. A, he didn't jump to his left in this cheek pieces for the first time. He was very straight, which was great to see. And B, the track seemed to be quite uniform throughout the chase track. There didn't seem to be a great advantage to be gained from going wide, but it was, to me, it was one of the performances of the season so far. He was brilliant. And as Matt said, he beat Marine Nationale by 19 lengths. How can Marine Nationale bridge that gap? Matchbook's jumping on the Race IQ Jump Index, he gained over 16 lengths. Marine Nationale lost over 4 lengths. So if he can jump on a par with Matchbook through Cheltenham, which there's every chance he will be able to do that, given that he's back at Cheltenham where he's 2 for 2. He's a Supreme Novices Hurdle winner and a Champion Chase winner. There's every chance that he'll at least close that gap a little bit. I think the better ground will help Marine Nationale. I think he's, as Matt was saying, Barry Collins' horses just seem to, it's a small sample size that we have. It's a small yard, but they seem to really zing at Cheltenham. He did double there the other day as well. So all of those, you're kind of looking for reasons why Marine Nationale might bridge the gap. That said, Matchbook is only 6. Now, Marine Nationale, he's 9 years old, but he's only had 9 runs over fences, so I wouldn't hold his age or his depth of experience against him. It's probably a positive, actually. But Matchbook, he's the Triumph Hurdle winner. He ran a massive race in the Arca last year. He actually made a mistake at the 4th last fence as well, which we kind of, we hone in on the second last, but he made a mistake at the 4th last as well. Made that terrible mistake at the second last. Wasn't good at the last either, and still was only beaten 3 parts of a length by Django Bay. So look, he's got a serious engine, and yeah, he's a Cheltenham horse as well. So to me, he's a rock solid favourite. I think Marine Nationale will get closer to him than he did at Leopardstown, but whether he can bridge all of the 19 lengths and a little bit more in order to go and win it, I'm not sure. But I'm really looking forward to the race. I probably won't have a bet in it. Agree with Matt on Loup de Sud. I just don't think he's that class. Il était temps, like when he won the Tingle Creek and he was put in as favourite for the Champion Chase shortly thereafter, I was against him then, thinking that he could be taking out a lot of the market, but because at Cheltenham he just hasn't been able to do it at Cheltenham for whatever reason. Then he obviously got beaten last time in the Clarence House Chase, and now he's out to probably his correct price. So he deserves his chance in the race, but I just can't see him beating Marine Nationale or Majborough. Calixius, yeah, fair case that Matt's made for Calixius. He could run well at a price. He was upside Marine Nationale at the last fence. I think Marine Nationale would have beaten him pretty well anyway. Just the strength with which he went to the line. But look, Calixius, he's a player in the race, and he's a Cheltenham horse as well. He's a Triumph Hurdle winner, as well as running that big race in the Champion Chase last year. Interesting that Irish Panther's still in here. He's probably going to go for the Arkle, but they did give him an entry in the Champion Chase as well. So if it cuts up a lot, then you wouldn't, if there were going to be 3 or 4 or 5 runners, then Irish Panther could take his chance, but I think he's going to go for the Arkle anyway. But no, I can't find a betting angle into the race. I agree with Matt that Majborough should probably be further ahead of Marine Nationale in the market than he is. And if Marine Nationale were to drift, and if that kind of school of thought starts to gain traction, then maybe Marine Nationale would become a bet at a bigger price. But at the prices at the moment, yeah, I find it hard to find an angle.
Yeah, maybe Matt, final word to you. What odds do the top 2 go off SP?
I would say about 6-4 and about 11-4, I would have thought.
Okay. And then Donn's back in Marine Nationale 11-4. Do you foresee that around the SPs, or no? No, you need bigger.
No, I like it. If they bet 6-4 and 11-4, I think probably Majborough is maybe overpriced at 6-4 more than Marine Nationale is at 11-4. I think maybe closer to the time they might come from Majborough, he could go off closer to 2.0, so. And maybe Marine Nationale will drift out to 4.5 or 5.0.
Yeah, maybe. Although Marine Nationale has his supporters, and you know that counts for a lot in betting because it is ultimately down to the money that comes in. So yeah, fascinating market.
It might depend on how Willie Mullins has done to that point.
Yeah. Well, that Irish Panther before, I wouldn't be surprised if he ran the Champion Chase, because I don't think he's going to win the Arkle. So maybe, I know I listened to
Champion Chase an easier race than the Arkle.
Definitely not. But third in a Champion Chase is more glory, I guess, than third in the Arkle. But he will obviously be shorter price for the Arkle, so we'll see. Yeah, that's true. And he, especially with Romeo Coolio, potentially heading to the Brown Advisory, which we'll head to next. So the Brown Advisory Novice Chase, I'll go through the prices, and maybe Don, I'll start with you. But we got Final Demand. I think I might have missed something, because last time I checked this markets, they were all joint fabs. But Final Demand, there has been a small bit of money on the Matchbook exchange over the last couple of weeks. 5.05, 7.2, the big Westerner. You've got 9.2 Wendigo, who's been quite popular, tipped up a lot with a lot of the racing post tipsters, actually. Western Full, 9.4. K Dahi there, who I missed, 8.2. And then you've got Romeo Coolio, very interesting runner if he does go, 13.5. And the lay price similar enough. So it does look like if he does go to Cheltenham race, he will go here. And we 15.5 and bigger the rest. There is horses that we will cover. Don, give us your thoughts on the ways. We'll bring Matt's trend in a second. But yeah, I was caught a little bit surprised yesterday having a look at the market. I hadn't looked at the Brown Advisory for about a week. And am I missing something? Why are we all going back for Final Demand? Is there just a lot of forgiveness in the air off his run in DRF?
Yeah, and I think you can forgive him his run in the Leopardstown race. Maybe the media visit to Willie Mullins' yard has been a factor in that. But look, he was so good in winning his biggest chase at Navan, and then I thought he was impressive in the Faugheen Chase at Limerick. I've heard a couple of comments since that he wasn't impressive, but I thought he was. I thought his jumping was really, really good. He got stronger as the race developed. We know that he handles that soft ground, but we know he handles better ground as well. Like it was yielding ground when he won at Punchestown back in May. So yeah, like just the last day in the Dublin Racing Festival race, he didn't jump. It never looked like he was comfortable. So for whatever reason, Willie Mullins saying that, you know, they'll try a few different things with him and see if they can just leave that run behind and move on from it. And if he got back to the form that he was showing, that he showed at Limerick, or obviously his hurdles form, then that would make him a big player in the race. That goes without saying. But I think his defeat at Leopardstown maybe deflated some of the hype about him, which I think is correct. You know, I think it's correct that he should be very high in the market, if not at the top of the market. But I think now he's around about the price that he should be. Romeo Coolio, fascinating inclusion if he goes here. The Ryanair Chase was an option, but I think that's not an option anymore. So it's the Arkle or the Brown Advisory, or skip it and go on to the Willow Worm Gold Cup at Ferryhouse, which is probably the ideal race for him. But his owners, KTTA Racing, they obviously like to run at the Cheltenham Festival, and you can understand why. But Gordon was kind of thinking that he's a Gold Cup horse in the making for next year, please God. So what race do you run him in here? If that's your ultimate goal, to try and win a Gold Cup next year, what race do you run him in at this year's Cheltenham Festival? And I think the Arca is the answer to that. So it's going to be fascinating to see where he goes. The big Westerner, she's a big player in the race. Obviously, she ran a massive race in the Albert Bartlett Hurdle last year. She was beaten by Jasmine DeVoe. She suffered a bit of traffic problems down at the second last flight. She was towards the inside, and Jasmine DeVoe came in around the outside. I think you can mark her up on that run, but I don't think she'd have beaten Jasmine DeVoe anyway. He won with plenty in hand, but it was still a massive run by her. And then her debut this season, she finished second behind Jimmy Desai, who's not in the race anymore. And then last time she was really good in winning the Mares Race to Donn Run Chase at Limerick over Christmas, in beating Jade de Grugy. She probably is a better horse on soft ground. That goes without saying. Like she ideally she'd get soft ground, but it was good to soft for the Albert Bartlett last year, and she handled it well. So I think she's okay on the ground. She's only had 2 runs over fences, and we know obviously that she goes well at Cheltenham. We know that Henry de Bromhead horses, they seem to improve when they get to Cheltenham. So I think she's a big player in the race. And Wendigo, yeah, he ran in the Albert Bartlett Hurdle last year. He's a massive player in the race as well. I know he's popular now, but he actually, at the second last flight, he stumbled quite badly on the run to the home turns, and he finished 5th in the end behind Jasmine DeVoe. That was a big run. In the Cato Star Chase, when he finished behind Kitzbühel, he jumped to his left. The race wasn't the race to suit him. He stayed on well, and he finished best of all. He's finished second in the Shallow Hurdle last year, is running the Albert Bartlett last season. Told you that he could be, or that he is a Cheltenham horse, that he goes well at Cheltenham. He had a nice run at Ayr where he was seriously impressive in winning last time. That obviously was, to go and win a race, having had that run in the Cato Star Chase. So I think he's a player as well. Cheltenham, the stamina test that Cheltenham presents will suit him. Back left-handed will suit him, and he goes well at the track. So yeah, he's a big player in the race. And yeah, you mentioned Kate Duthie was good at Leopardstown. Kitzbühel has to bounce back from his Sandown run. Western Foal is the other horse, just give him a mention. He's a really unusual novice. He's run 11 times now over fences, which is kind of so unusual for a high-class novice. But he won the Galway Plate. He beat Affordale Fury at Goran Park, and then last time there at the Dublin Racing Festival, I thought he ran really well and finished second behind Kate Duthie. It was his first run back since early November. He'll come on for that run. The ground should have been softer than ideal for him, and he'll be a better horse on better ground as well. So he's an unusual. I'm sure he probably doesn't fit in with any of Matt's trends, which you hear about now in a second. An 11-time racer, raced over fences, Galway Plate winner, going to a Brown Advisory Chase. But it's interesting in the race. And also Oscar's brother, if he were to come here, I'm not sure what plans are for him, but he's been a credit to Conor King and his brother Daniel. They've only got 2 horses, and he was brilliant in winning the 10-up chase. He got out in front. It was the first run back since November as well. But Daniel King obviously had every confidence in his fitness for the job, and he stayed on well to beat the Wall Park. That was a big run. He's still lightly raced, still progressive. And yeah, wherever he goes next, he'll be interesting. If he does line up in the Brown Advisory Chase, he's a player as well, I think.
Okay, yeah, Matt, I guess we got to start, and you hit us with your trend whenever you feel fit to bring it into your analysis, but you do have to start with that final demand price of 5.0. And in some ways, it's the wrong price in the sense he should be shorter or should be bigger if you believe the DRF run, or maybe he's been overrated by, by the market, or whether you believe the hype, or maybe less so given he has produced on the track, obviously, in his first run, and maybe less so the second run. So that 5.0, it's not going to be 5.0 on the day, is it? He's going to come in for support, or maybe we might see a little bit more of a drift, or what do you think of that?
It's difficult, isn't it? And it's a fascinating question. I'm basically in the same camp with Donn on him. The one thing I'd add is seeing a Willie Mullins interview the other day since his DRF flop, suggesting that he hasn't been sparkling at home all season. And I wonder if that maybe was why Patrick didn't really go for him at Limerick at the business end. Is he a bit of a sort of caution bullies lesser opposition? And then when he comes up against a good horse, it isn't so good. So I couldn't have him at that sort of price. And this is a fantastic race. This is a real tribute to Cheltenham's brilliant decision to go back to the pre-2010 programme of 2 level weights novice chases rather than 4, because you could easily find out it's still about 4.0 of the field on the day, could well be into double figures in the number of horses running. Just to answer Donn's question on the Western Fold statistic, the horse is Rule Supreme. He was a second season novice who ran 8 times over fences. That's the most this century. Normally 4 or 5 as many of them have had. So yeah, really unusual preparation he's had. I mean, on the bare form, then that 157 rating for splitting or just being behind Envoylen and Affordale Fury at Down Royal is well earned. I just think that you're going to have to run to a little bit better than that here, and he hasn't got the obvious improvement in him. But on a sound surface, he should be there and thereabouts. Might be more one for the place market. The statistic here is that horses that have run in the previous year's Albert Bartlett, 7 from 35, 122% profit, and they finished 1P1, 4P15 in the Albert Bartlett. So a real mix of performances. Never be put off by a good horse not having taken to that test early in their career. It's the race that's most underestimated at the Cheltenham Festival every season. So that form we'll come on to in a moment. Cade Doughty, I think perhaps that race fell apart a bit at the DRF because Final Demand didn't perform and Western Fold looked like he's having a bit of a pipe opener on ground that he wouldn't like. He's already in cheek pieces, which he wore his last start over hurdles as well. I'm not a big fan of that in this race. It's a tough attritional contest. If you need headgear already as a chaser, suggesting that you're not inclined to put it all in. Horses in headgear 0 from 34 since Garrison Savannah won in 1990. I personally would be surprised if Romeo Culio showed up here after teaching him to run as a 2-miler in the last 2 starts. The last thing I would do is run here. To me, it's either Arkle or Fairy House. So I'd want to take him on for all. I think he's a really good long-term prospect. Silly Isles rather fell apart. Kitzbühel had been so good in the Quarto Star going sideways at the ditch in front of the stands. I didn't see that coming. And Carlo Conti not having the scope to jump out the ground. So it looks like Fergal O'Brien might be going for a handicap with 6 Mile Bridge. Cocktail de Van looked good over an extended 2.5 on yielding ground at Christmas and blowing apart that beginners at Leopardstown. But he'd been beaten stayers and handicap projects. They didn't look to get home when 3 lengths second Oscar's brother in the Florida Pearl over 3 miles at Punchestown. So better ground would help, but I'd still be a bit worried about stamina for him. Oscar's brother franked that form by winning what was probably a week 10 up. He does tend to give some of his fences a lot of air, but he is tough and game. He's got a bit of a chance. But the 2 I like are from that Albert Bartlett stat. The Big Westerner, as Donn said, didn't get a clear run when second there. And I agree with Donn, would have been close to Jasmine DeVoe, but without winning. And Henry's top novice chasers often half cooked on chasing debut. His Gold Cup winners, Manella and Donaput, are both beaten on their first chase start. She ran a good race behind Jimmy DeSoy, who looked a different proposition on a sound surface in that race to the 2 runs in the mud subsequently. She then outstayed the classy Jade de Grugy over an extended 2.6 at Limerick. She jumps, travels. She likes soft ground, albeit she showed she can handle a sound surface in the Albert Bartlett. And Henry's bringing her here off just 2 chase starts, as he often does. So I think she's likely to put up a big run. It's a narrow call. I like her, but I've gone with Wendigo, who looks absolutely the right type for a Broadway. As Don was explaining, he was really balked in the Albert Bartlett after 2 out. I think he'd have been third, not far behind the Big Westerner had he got a clear run. He stumbled badly there. He's had 4 runs over fences stretching back to October. Now, if we're going to get a bigger field, old-fashioned Broadway, they're going to gallop, that experience could be a big plus. Horses have been able to get away without that in small field, steadily run renewals recently. He won the Grade 2 Berkshire over 2.5, despite clearly not wanting that trip. Quarto Star wasn't his cup of tea at all. Don said he was jumping out to the left, and that was good fast ground. But he stuck at it really well, was beaten less than 4 lengths behind Kitzbühel. He's a pretty good jumper. He gallops, he stays. And he showed in the Berkshire, even though that didn't suit him, he had a touch of class. He's from an underrated trainer in Jamie Snowden, who's a string of big race successes with, not having big money owners backing him. If you look at the sort of horses, the ratings they've got, the ones that he has had managed to get 140, 150, a lot of them have won good races. So he's a trainer who tends to be a bit underestimated. Only 6 of his 27 runners at the festival have gone off shorter than 21.0 and 2 of them have won. So I think Wendigo's made for this. If he gets soft ground, all the better. And what just tilted it his way was he might be a bit more battle hardened over fences than the Big Westerner is. But I like them both, but I'm going with Wendigo.
Okay, so Big Westerner, current price 7.2, Wendigo 9.2. Can you see them going off shorter than that? I guess a lot depends on the final demand vibes, Matt.
It does. And also, how many are going to turn up here? You know, I've had a lot of people saying, oh, you're going to get 15, 18 runners. then the prices are going to hold up if that happens. But it might be that it cuts up down to 11 or 12, something like that. I don't think we're going to get 6 or 7 as we've had in previous years.
Yeah.
And the final demand vibe, yeah, it'd be interesting to see. And I think, again, we discussed earlier, it might depend a bit on how Willie's done on the first day.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating market, especially if we get 10, 11 runners and 6 of them have a proper chance. Donn, for you, final word. Anything jumping out of the price at the moment? I know, listen to your analysis there, or are you wait on the day or a day or two before the race in decks?
No, the 2 I was interested in are not running. Neither of them. They're not even in at this stage. But no, I'm in Matt's camp with both, actually, the Big Westerner and Wendigo. I think they're both big players in the race. I think I'll be taking on Final Demand. That was my kind of position early in the season anyway, and it's kind of softened a little bit since he was beaten and since he's a bigger price. But I think they will back him close.
They're going to come from. I agree.
A clear favorite, yeah.
I think 5-2 job on the day. We'll see. Again, all depends on how Willie's been doing, but even given his 4-timer there over the weekend, I think that he's going to time that right for the Cheltenham Festival. But we're done. My thanks to Matt and Donn. Comprehensive look at the Brown Advisory, their Champion Chase, Eyecatchers and Weekend Review. We've only got a couple of weeks left on the show, but very much looking forward to chatting with Matt and Donn over the last couple of weeks. And stay tuned to confirmation of our Cheltenham Preview Night, which is coming your way very soon. But enjoy the week's racing. We'll be back this time next week for another Cheltenham Trail. Bye-bye.